The Romans talk like we are not welcome in their lands. But is that true? Who are the Britannians, then? Men from far-off lands who arrive without invitation to become their overlords. All they needed to do was wear the same clothes as the old masters, and few could tell the difference. This is more than blindness. It is a fate to be slaves to any who dare claim them. And so I wonder, should we claim them? If they will send their coin and crop to men from a misty island in the great ocean, they will surely give it to a man camped outside their very walls. No? What about a man who speaks with the draw of his bow and can quake the earth neath the hooves of 10,000 horses with a mere motion of his hand? Of course, the Romans cannot stop us. They are not our rivals. They are hostages. They should be our hostages. They will be our slaves. What work they cannot do will be done with fire and blood. And what doomed breed of man dares resist shall see the ground lifted and the sky fall before our mighty tide. And I can promise you all this. I can be sure. I have seen it. We have all seen it. There is no escape from destiny. It is an arrow already in flight. So let us be like that arrow, and rise to see Rome as our foe does, as its divine masters.
Hello there and welcome back to Fields of Mars. In the previous episode, pretty much the whole thing was covering two major battles where Constans had to face the Sassanid Empire and narrowly avoided death and eventually won both those battles, although losing pretty much everything in the process, including his wife for unrelated causes back in Londinium. He was actually trapped after the battles, but an army of Pontus showed up to defeat the Sassanids once again, freeing his way back to our own territory. And then finally we switched focus onto Aurelianus because the Huns have reappeared and now it's time to try and strike against Attila. Attila and his 1.5 armies form up to face Aurelianus as he approaches, with the curious exception of these onagers out here. Most of the enemy's units were coming on as reinforcements, and they actually left behind their onagers, just left them in the start zone for the reinforcements. So I don't know what they were thinking here, and we definitely need to exploit this, because these onagers are going to be a critical part of the enemy's army. They have so many horse archers that we're going to be forced to basically not move and just sit in stationary testudo for the entire battle, and that could be heavily exploited by onager fire, especially from the large onagers. So now we are doing critical damage to the enemy's army. This is basically a saving grace, taking out all these onagers. It's going to massively reduce the damage we take. And the onagers really struggling to do anything against this one unit of cavalry going to attack them. Their army too far away to react, but Attila himself actually came out to investigate what was going on, perhaps coming to see why the onagers were still here, and as he gets close, noticing that some of our legionary cavalry are just gradually killing all of the crew subtly, and because the cavalry were moving around in such close proximity to the onagers were just constantly turning, so luckily they weren't firing to support each other. Attila eventually goes back once he realizes what's going on, so just one more unit of onagers to take out. They get a potential nice volley on our guys, but they miss luckily and we take them out. That unit of cavalry will now just walk up to sit near the enemy's army because they do have another unit of onagers. So I wanted to try the classic trick of getting those onagers to just fire at me and I'll dance around and dodge all their shots to waste all their ammo. But the same thing happens that happened the last time I tried to do this against the Huns, which is they just send the entire army against the one unit of baiting cavalry, which ruins the strategy, but it allows you to basically bait their entire army all the way back towards our position, which we do need to do because we are the attackers in this battle, but we do not want to attack the enemy because while mobile, our units will be super weak against everything the enemy has. So we do actually manage to just draw them into attacking us. The AI very easily provoked, it seems. So we're just sitting here with a nice line of Testudos, hoping to be as immune as possible to the enemy's ranged fire, and they have a lot of ranged units. It's basically all ranged units, this enemy army, tons of horse archers. But something strange was happening. You can see it happened in the replay as well. I was curious to see if this would happen. When I was playing the game, it kind of like lagged out and glitched for a few seconds, and then when it came back, our men seemed to be a lot less immune to ranged fire than I would have hoped, and actually they started destroying our men even through the stationary Testudos. Normally, as we've seen before, Testudos are literally invincible against ranged fire. You should take 0 losses, but it seemed to not be working anymore. Perhaps the enemy's weight of fire was just so great because they were focus firing on us, it managed to break through the stationary Testudo. I don't really know. There may have been some element of, once you take a few losses, the Testudo tries to reform and then doesn't count as being in Testudo until it stops moving around again. That's possibly what's happening. But anyway, so we do take a lot of losses from the ranged fire. Their melee cavalry and melee attack is going to be super ineffective here. They basically just stop those cataphracts, totally wasted. And they're even sending these pikes in to fight without their pikes. So pretty much the worst thing they could do with them. So that's nice. They'll be really bad just in a regular melee. Another unit down here on the right side of the line, facing the same fate as the one we saw earlier, where arrows coming in seem to be taking our guys out. They've gone out of stationary Testudo. You can see the front line now standing up. They kneel down to represent them going back into formation, but as arrows keep coming in, they're still getting cut down. This is very different to what we normally see from stationary Testudo. I don't know if it's to do with the angle. They're not firing at a particularly oblique angle to us. It seems to be relatively normal, within normal boundaries of what we've seen before. Perhaps it's just these Hunnic Devil archers, which the enemy are using, which are a really high tier archer unit, just are able to shoot through shields. They have armor piercing damage or something to that effect. So the enemy's supporting general died there. That wasn't Attila, of course, because we actually can't kill him in that fight. So that's going to help reduce their morale. We are going to want to take Attila out also. Some of the enemy's infantry are going to have some success against us here. They do have some axe warbands, which of course are pretty decent against our men because they are an anti-armor unit and our guys are all about melee defense and armor. So they'll be hacking through our men, but the enemy's morale is going to be quite poor in those regions. Plus, the enemy's horse archers are starting to run out of ammo, and this is the point of the battle that we're waiting for, really. We need the enemy to just waste all of those deadly arrows and then come into fight in melee. And it seems the AI is just programmed to, when it runs out of ammo, run towards the closest unit and attack it, even if that unit is a spear cohort in stationary Testudo, so an anti-cavalry unit with anti-cavalry bonuses. So that's going to be absolutely fine. But still, they've got so many units that they actually have plenty more ammo still to come. Now, Attila himself starts moving up towards the battle. He actually didn't run in here. He walked up to just investigate what was going on and set up in front of our line. I didn't want to move forward and attack him, even though that may be what he's baiting, because our men would, of course, be even more damaged by ranged fire. Eventually, though, he was drawn into a fight. He actually defeated one of my cohort auxilia hacking his way through. I had a unit of Legio behind, much less effective, but by this point, he has basically no men left, so he's still going to lose in this particular engagement. There he is going down. He is only wounded, of course, so no permanent effect, but that could be our ticket to winning this battle.
General! General! There you are. What in the name of Mars is happening out there? The men are panicking. They say that their armor has grown brittle, that their shields are too heavy to hold up. They can't stop the arrows, General. What? Is this the cold? That can't be possible, right? I don't know, General. These damned Huns have power unseen, surely. What favours do the gods give them over us? Are we being punished or something? I can't see the reason. They fell for our trap exactly as designed, but now the rules are changing before our eyes. If Mars is so unhappy with us, I shall give him a more pleasing display. Praetorians! Draw your swords and follow me.
Aurelianus has taken the Praetorian Guard out onto our right flank to fight with a bunch of enemy cavalry. This was mostly out of ammunition, ranged cav, but there was a unit of Jav cav nearby that came up to throw jabs into the back of the Praetorians. Super deadly here. They'll kill some of their own men at least, but it's mostly our troops here. So luckily we managed to win the actual melee fight and can try and engage those javelins. The Praetorians have good armor and good melee stats, so they're strong against everything, but everything in the game is also at least a bit weak against ranged fire, so they'll get taken down eventually by this. Really luckily we get the jabs into melee before they run away and counters across the entire map, so that's going to make things go our way there. Meanwhile, enemy axe troops are attacking the near-dead legionaries who have already taken all that damage from the arrow fire. So it looks like they might be about to break through a little bit on our right flank. We really need to free up our units and get mobile with the guys who aren't currently engaged. We're just absorbing the last of the enemy's ammunition, basically. So soon it will be safe to move around without just losing all of our units in a split second. The enemy making a heavy attack on the left flank, but it's holding and stable. Some of our cavalry had to clear up an enemy rear attack coming in. They sent some cav to attack our archers. They were quite successful, but we did take all of them down as well. And Aurelianus, kind of lucky here because the Jav cav he was chasing run off in the opposite direction to the rest of the enemy's army, so as he chases them away he'll actually be moving to safety, getting away from the enemy's horse archers, so that's all well and good. That axe unit attacking on the right was miraculously defeated, but was immediately replaced with an even more powerful melee unit, so our legionary is going to really struggle here. Luckily, we're getting to the point where we actually have a numerical advantage and can start doing maneuvers to finish off the rest of their army. More horse archers there rushing into melee. We almost got to deploy these pikes into the rear of those horse archers. Would have been really nice, and finally getting some use out of those pikes. Pikemen, of course, super weak against the Huns, because despite the fact the Huns are all cavalry, pikes are weak against ranged units, so all this ranged cavalry will just cut them down. So those horse archers tried to escape from the pikes, but ran into Aurelianus and got killed themselves. And now the rest of the battle is going to be grinding to a close. We have an infantry advantage, and the enemy are starting to fall back. They have lost Attila, which I believe does give them the same general loss debuff as actually having the general killed. And the rest of the enemy's ranged units out in the forest just gave up before we got to them, ending the fight in a close victory. We took extreme losses. It was harder than expected, although we did achieve the strategic objective of defeating Attila once more. So as you can see here, he is still alive. His unit will carry on, but that's 2 defeats, and I think once we get to 3, we'll start getting some actual progress. A couple of units in his army dead, a load of units in the army that supported him also dead, but on our side we've lost units too. We lost a full unit of spear cohort and a unit of legionaries, which is going to be super difficult to replenish. We have to go a long way to get to the nearest legionary barracks. I think it's in one of the islands on the Mediterranean. And I was just noting there how most of the enemy's kills, of course, came from their ranged units, and just taking a little look over it. Just to confirm, it's the same every time, but I'd like to make sure that their melee units haven't actually gotten good at any point. So that's the end of that. We are in the middle of winter, so moving anymore will cause our army to get even more damage. So I'm just going to fortify right now, even though I possibly could chase Attila and try and defeat him again. There's no guarantee it would even be possible given the losses we've taken now. So we now move on to the next turn, and the Sassanids appear to attack that army from Pontus. Luckily it can escape and the Sassanids just go home, except one army which stays to enjoy winter attrition. Very good of it. But the Huns, of course, like the Sassanids, have an infinite supply of armies, always just off screen, just in the fog of war where you can't see them. So 3 more armies appear out of nowhere to attack Aurelianus, and this is a pretty standard attack from the Huns. Tons of horse archers, tons of cataphracts. This second army got a little bit of infantry to support. Now I considered fighting this battle because even though the balance bar looks really bad, we do have the fortifications on our side, which are really strong against the Huns because the fort towers will constantly take out their horse archers, and we can just sit in testudo absorbing the ammo in the meantime. But after that last battle, I wasn't so confident that the use of the testudo really would gain us the advantage that it tended to do in the past, at least. So I ended up saying just retreat. Another reason is that defeating those armies wouldn't achieve anything strategically. They would just come back because, of course, the Huns get their armies for free. So you don't really need to fight them unless you're going to immediately take a settlement or take out Attila. Fighting them otherwise is pretty much useless. It should only be done defensively. Now, the Western Roman Empire has an interesting offer for us. They want us to marry into their imperial family. Their emperor, in fact, wants to marry this girl. This is Aurelianus' daughter, so a key member of our own family. And they're even willing to pay a little bit for the privilege, which makes it go down a little bit easier. And although Constans may personally be against this offer, I decided that Aurelianus would be happy to accept this extremely highborn marriage for his daughter. So that actually means our noble family is really tied in with the highest echelons of former Roman nobility now. As we hack through the bad news, I'm going to take a little look at the family tree to confirm what's happening. And as I was here, I actually noticed something. The daughter of Constans, who we sold to the Asian Romans, is now dead. Because Asia as a faction is defeated, it just deletes all of their characters no matter where they were, so even the wife of the emperor has unfortunately just died. So Constans has paid a hefty price for that short-term alliance with Asia against Aaron, I believe it was. He also has two other sons of mature age. One is currently the governor in Thracia. The other we will see a little bit more of in the future as he comes into play. And here's the confirmation of Aurelianus' family situation. He is married to a noble of the Eastern Roman Empire's old imperial family, and now his daughter is married to the emperor of the Western Roman Empire. So basically he is in an extremely strong political position in terms of his family ties. So with all that sorted, it's time to look once again at strategy, and our strategy here now is going to be pretty simple. We just need to get our armies back into shape. We need to defend, we need to replenish our forces, because both the Huns and the Sassanids are just attacking relentlessly. There's really not much we can do to advance against them. We just need to build up our defences and our economy and hope that the situation changes. It was quite an enlightening trip. Throughout the ceremony I was mulling over where I'd heard the name of the bride before, until finally she came up and answered for me. This mysterious Pompilia was none other than Pompilia Flavius Maro, my own niece. It was our first meeting, and probably the second time I'd ever heard the name. She thought quite highly of me, or at least she had been instructed to do so. She hadn't expected me to be there either. I explained it was the Emperor's own wish, and she was quite satisfied. I learned a fair bit about what's been happening in the family. Another niece I didn't know I had is dead, sadly. But mostly happy and healthy, but for endless, all-consuming wars, of course. With a sense of inevitability, our plans to defend and replenish ourselves are interrupted by the arrival of a million more Sassanid stacks, but this time they're actually focusing on attacking that army from Pontus, bringing 4 armies into the engagement, although that first one is only a few troops. Now we have the opportunity to come and join this battle with our garrison and Septimus. I had hoped that Constans, who's actually standing right there, would also reinforce, but apparently he's just about too far away. If he'd been there, I would definitely have joined the battle, but instead it's an even engagement, and that, although it means we can win, the balance bar doesn't factor in the power of ranged units, so you don't really know what's going to happen basically when the balance bar is even, so it's a bit of a risk for no real gain, because we wouldn't gain any territory or anything, and it would be better perhaps to allow them to attack our defences, to use towers and choke points. But in the end I decided that Septimus at least would want to go out and aid the forces of Pontus in order to repay them for the services they gave us in the last episode, when they effectively saved Constans and his main force by coming to attack the Sassanids while they were sitting in our own territory just after we defeated them last time, which stopped Constans from being trapped. So basically, yes, here we are. The Pontus army is hiding itself in the forest and we're moving to form up on its flank, except Septimus is taking his cavalry right out onto the edge of the map to get some nice opportunities to potentially rear flank the enemy, but things are being thrown away early by Pontus. It's always nice to investigate what happens when you have an ally on your side, because you can see what the AI actually does, because you can look at their order lines, and you can see what the Pontus army is doing is it's going to sprint in a nice diagonal line along the face of the enemy's advancing front line with the objective of trying to get behind it by just running straight through the front. So not the best tactic, and now as they do this movement they're just going to get arrows rained upon them by all of the foot and cavalry archers who are already attacking their flanks right now. So clearly this is not going to be particularly effective for us. It seems like we are just going to lose our ally. Meanwhile, our army is in a pretty formidable position. We've got a hill and a very stable looking formation. I was hoping that Pontus might just stay right where they are and then I could advance slightly to outflank the enemy as they attacked Pontus. But that's not going to happen. Pontus going to throw their troops away. Here you can see they actually have some mounted archers of their own. They move forward to engage with the enemy and they lose literally half their troops in literally seconds. It goes very, very poorly indeed. So they're just going to be wiped out, Pontus. Once the melee fights start, they'll have a bit more of a chance because their infantry is roughly on parity with the enemy's generic spears, but with all those arrows raining everywhere, they'll be dead soon. Meanwhile, a few of the enemy's units were actually in range of my own formation here. I've got these archers on a nice raised position quite far back from our front line, hoping that I could fire over the top and avoid friendly fire. Clearly, it doesn't work, judging by the bodies now appearing behind our own lines, but still, it's probably worth it here because we are doing decent damage to the enemy's javelins and their crossbow cav who've come up to engage. Plus, the return fire is mostly coming into this Testudos, and in this particular battle, the Testudo is behaving itself. It is doing no damage at all that enemy fire. We also have some onagers in our formation, and I shot fire out to set all of these forests in front of our position ablaze. We didn't actually hit anything with this, and unfortunately the fires don't do anything in this game. They are cosmetic fires, so you can see the enemy can run through them, which is unfortunate because that would have been a perfect opportunity for a fire attack given the terrain we have right here. So anyway, the enemy are going to begin their main attack on us, having basically annihilated the Pontus army very, very quickly. This unit of cavalry actually breaking through our spears and coming to harass our archers, very annoying. I've got all my legionaries in this second line, and they're all off fire at will for obvious reasons. This unit of javeliniers here, which is being accidentally targeted onto something, was probably following a unit that ran away, is going to move up to the front line and end up fighting in melee, most likely. Now, something I want you to look at in this replay is what happened to this unit on the right flank here, because I noticed in the battle it just died without me noticing. So I want you to come and look and try and work out why. And here is where it died. Basically, some volleys of arrows came in, and literally half the unit was just completely annihilated instantaneously, and that was not what I expected. They're even in the middle of forming a stationary testudo, and it's going to actually delay that formation because of all those losses. So that's just a volley from 2 or 3 of the enemy archer units. They are so obscenely powerful. I suspect those Kurdish archers might have armor-piercing damage or something akin to javelins, because these guys have super high armor values to the extent that arrows should do virtually no damage to legionaries at all. So don't really know what's going on there. It may just be crossbow bolts as well, which also do have armor piercing damage. Now, Septimus and his cavalry haven't really found an opportunity to attack yet, but what I have managed to do is kite off a large number of enemy units who are now completely separate from the battle, so I'm just going to leave them there and now run away, run back to the battle line. So those guys aren't taking part in the fight. We're not going to engage them because the enemy's crossbow cav will just kill us, so it's just nice to take the pressure off our main army, which is under a lot of pressure right now. Some of our frontline units starting to break against the enemy's assault. Their infantry is better than my front line, my second line's where all of the work is going to come in. Really, it's just going to come down to a grind now, and we need our cavalry to come back to support and hope we don't lose things too quickly.
He marches. He marches. It feels like none of this happened. Like all the worry he gave me for my multiple meetings with death was just a dream. He doesn't care. Or maybe he is just too dumb to learn. All of this is happening because of him. He sacrifices Romans by the day and by the 100, all in service of those mystical paeans of the East that live in his little town. I should never have let him even try to hold it. Will this be the time that he learns the lesson via an arrow through the chest? Those men, they followed me here, did everything I asked of them like true Romans. And they trusted Septimus just as much, for that was my wish. Well, I regret it. He kills my men because he cares not for them or I. What a cursed son to have.
The return of Septimus and his cavalry, teaming up with our cavalry reserve, basically overwhelms the enemy on our right flank. We're just going to push them completely off of our line, at just the right time as well, because we were about to lose all of our infantry in that position. And the other thing we need to do is try and get all of these archers into melee and just clear them out, because the damage they're doing is extreme. So Septimus is going to be leading the charge here, trying to just push through and make contact with all these archer units who are all in a big line going down the hill to just try and get them into a melee. These are the archer units that are also a melee unit, so they're relatively decent in melee, but still not anything in comparison to Praetorian Cav, so hoping to hack through them there. Over here on our far right, some of my javeliniers have been drawn into melee because they were chasing a crossbow cav unit that was just skirmishing away, so they're now trying to escape from that melee, but as they run up the hill getting away, the crossbow cav unit is still just sitting there, so it's going to be sniping away at them the whole time. So once again, those cheeky crossbow cav eluding us and doing more and more damage to us, setting all the trees on fire around those guys for some reason as well. But the main bulk of the enemy's army there is shattering now, and we're pushing forwards into a big messy formation to try and clear things up, basically. So Septimus and the cavalry are basically going to continue their push against the enemy's range units. There are so many of them, we just kept pushing and getting further and further away from our army. And here you can see some camels appear to threaten us, and Septimus is going to have to do some micro to get away from that. The problem we're having here is that the enemy's reinforcements are still coming onto the field, so individual units are just appearing about the place and coming out of the forests all the time. More ranged units, there's more melee and crossbow cav coming in as well, so we do have to be pretty careful with our cavalry out there because they are going to get rear attack pretty soon. Meanwhile, you can see I was trying to just finish off this one last enemy unit from their main assault. Got my entire army fighting it, but it really wouldn't go away. And the whole time we were taking arrow fire, which was not going well, so I sent some cavalry to try and take out those archers, but this didn't go well either. We got the first unit into melee, and we might have been able to win that. But the unit right behind it was just firing straight forwards and miraculously avoiding the friendly fire and just completely annihilating the troops on our side. So we got absolutely destroyed in a matter of seconds. Not what I expected, but once again proving that these archers are extremely powerful and do have the mysterious ability to avoid friendly fire. It's easier to avoid it firing at cavalry because they're slightly up from the ground and it shoots the rider rather than the horse. But anyway, back out in the middle of nowhere where our cavalry is still trying to take down enemy ranged units, we're getting increasingly threatened by the arrival of new enemy units from the reinforcement direction. I thought it was just onagers and ranged units because that's all I could see because of all these forests in the battle, but once I actually arrived it became clear they had a lot of stuff hiding back here. We did manage to take out most of the onagers, but at the cost of the cavalry unit sent to do it, because now they're sitting right in front of all these crossbow cav. Here though we did make the enemy do some friendly fire on themselves because they're in a column formation, so the guys at the back were also shooting their own crossbow cav at the front, so that was nice, but we're still going to lose pretty much the entire unit there and they'll rout away soon under that fire. More melee units coming in as well to support. It's going to be a similar deal for these cav out here who are just fighting these tiny enemy cavalry units, and we'd probably win eventually fighting with these guys, but they just kept sending in more and more tiny units, and even with all those guys in there we'd probably win. But the problem is this one unit of ranged cav which is just raining arrows on everything. So slowly but surely that is going to cause the death of all of our cavalry. We did lose everything out there, as we can see here. But at the same time, the enemy started to shatter. I was reforming, ready to receive all these new units, but they just gave up, perhaps once they saw our formation getting back into order, leaving just a couple of crossbow cav units who rode up to begin engaging our line. I sent forward the foot archers to try and deal with them. The enemy's morale was already low, and their troop count already very low as well. So a couple of volleys was enough to scare them off, so not much damage going to come from that. And that's the end of the battle. We have won in the end, and we can see these hills are absolutely covered in bodies from all sides. A Pyrrhic victory indeed. Part of that rating will be because of the loss of the Pontus army, of course, so it may not be all that bad, but the loss of Pontus raises the question of why we did this at all, because of course we came out to fight for their honour and to repay the debt we owed to them for the services they've done to us, and we've killed all of the enemies, but Pontus are dead as well, so they're not exactly going to appreciate it. With state resources increasingly being poured into mercenary and auxiliary troops needed immediately on the front lines, little was left aside to continue developing the revived tactics of old Rome. And even less was available to promote the worship of the old Roman gods, so much so that even in Britannia the more ingrained traditions of Celtic paganism were returning. In some regions this lapse was quite deliberate, for many of the officials who had joined Britannia from the collapse of the Western Roman Empire had not truthfully forsaken their previous pledges to Christianity. Across all territories, the majority of people did not identify as Roman pagan, but laws still existed to insist that they do. And of course, no good was coming of it. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see Constans go off on another of his classic adventures in the next episode of Fields of Mars.